In a small town surrounded by green hills and quiet roads, life was simple and peaceful. People greeted each other with warm smiles, and everyone seemed to know one another. The bus route that wound through the town was more than just transportation. It was part of the community's heartbeat. Every day, people hopped on and off, sharing bits of their lives during the ride. One chilly evening, a young woman who worked at the local library stepped onto the bus after finishing her shift. She wasn't someone you'd notice right away, just an ordinary person trying to get home after a long day. But what happened next turned her into the center of attention in ways she never imagined. The bus driver that night was a man in his 50s. He had been driving the same route for years, and while he was good at his job, he had a reputation for being short-tempered. Most passengers avoided talking to him unless absolutely necessary. Still, no one thought much of it because, well, he was just doing his job, or so they believed. As the bus rattled down the road, the young woman realized something was wrong. Her wallet had slipped out of her bag without her noticing. When she spotted it lying near the front of the bus, close to where the driver sat, she decided to retrieve it. It seemed like a harmless action, a quick step forward, a polite request. But things spiraled out of control faster than anyone could have predicted. When she approached the driver and asked if she could grab her wallet, his reaction shocked everyone. Instead of simply nodding or handing it back, he snapped at her. "Don't distract me while I'm driving," he barked, his voice sharp enough to cut through the hum of the engine. Before she could even respond, he did something unthinkable. He got up from his seat, leaving the bus still moving, and shoved her hard. The force sent her stumbling backward, landing awkwardly on the floor. The other passengers froze, unsure of how to react. Some gasped, others whispered among themselves, but no one moved to intervene immediately. The young woman sat there, stunned and shaken, clutching her arm where the impact had left a bruise. The driver stood glaring at her, his face red with anger as though daring anyone to speak up. It didn't take long for reality to sink in. A few brave souls pulled out their phones and dialed the police. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as emergency vehicles approached the scene. By the time officers arrived, the tension inside the bus was palpable. The young woman was sitting quietly now, trying to compose herself, while the driver remained defiant, refusing to admit any wrongdoing. The officers wasted no time. After speaking briefly with witnesses and assessing the situation, they placed the driver under arrest. Handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists as murmurs rippled through the crowd. No one could believe what they were seeing. Their trusted bus driver, led away in handcuffs over an argument about a wallet. It felt surreal, almost like watching a scene from a movie instead of real life. Word spread quickly throughout the town. By morning, nearly everyone had heard about the incident. Conversations buzzed in coffee shops, grocery stores, and workplaces. How could this happen? Was the driver always capable of such behavior? Or was this a rare moment of losing control? And what would happen to him now? For the young woman, the ordeal was far from over. As news of the arrest dominated discussions, all eyes turned to her. Reporters knocked on her door, eager to hear her side of the story. Friends and neighbors offered sympathy, urging her to seek justice. But deep down, she wrestled with conflicting emotions. Yes, she had been hurt, both physically and emotionally. Yet something stopped her from wanting revenge. Something about the driver's face stayed with her, tugging at memories buried deep within her past. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of a story that would challenge everything the town thought they knew about forgiveness, redemption, and second chances. The days following the incident were a whirlwind for the young woman. Reporters camped outside her house, shoving microphones in her face and asking questions that felt invasive. "Are you pressing charges?" they'd ask, their voices overlapping, in a chaotic chorus. "How does it feel to be attacked by someone you trusted?" The attention was overwhelming, and she struggled to find peace even in her own home. But amidst the noise, something inside her refused to let anger take over. She replayed the moment on the bus in her mind, the driver's outburst, the shove, the look of rage on his face. Yet, there was another image lingering too, one from years ago. She remembered him differently back then. He wasn't just a gruff bus driver. He had once been a neighbor who lived a few houses down. She was only a child at the time. But she vividly recalled how he had helped her during a fierce storm, when a tree branch crashed onto her family's porch. That memory tugged at her heart. It didn't excuse what he had done, but it made her pause. Was this really the same person? Could someone change so drastically over time? Or was it possible that beneath his hardened exterior, there was still a trace of the man who had once shown kindness, without expecting anything in return? Her thoughts churned as she attended the court hearing where the case would officially begin. Sitting in the cold, sterile courtroom, she watched as the driver appeared before the judge. His shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on the floor. He looked defeated, almost unrecognizable compared to the fiery figure on the bus. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if anyone else could see the weight he carried, not just from the charges against him, but from something deeper, something unresolved in his life. When it came time for her to speak, all eyes turned to her. The room fell silent, waiting for her to demand justice, but instead of anger, her voice carried calmness. "I don't want to press charges," she said firmly, though softly. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. People whispered among themselves, some nodding in approval, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Afterward, reporters swarmed around her again, desperate for answers. Why had she chosen forgiveness over punishment? Didn't she realize he could hurt someone else? Her response was simple, yet profound. "Punishing him won't fix what's broken inside him," she explained. "If we lock him away, nothing changes. But maybe there's another way." Her words sparked heated debates across the town. Some people admired her courage and compassion, calling her decision noble. Others criticized her, saying she was letting him off too easily. Regardless of the opinions swirling around her, she stood by her choice. Deep down, she believed that true healing required more than just consequences. It needed understanding. Determined to get to the root of the problem, she requested a meeting with the driver while he was still under supervision. At first, he refused to see her, convinced she was playing some kind of trick. But eventually, curiosity, or perhaps desperation, got the better of him, and he agreed to talk. They met in a quiet room at the police station, sitting across from each other like strangers despite sharing such a raw and personal history. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched thin until finally he broke it. "Why are you doing this?" he asked gruffly, avoiding her gaze. "You should hate me. Everyone else does." She leaned forward slightly, her expression gentle but firm. "I don't hate you," she replied. "But I need to understand why this happened. What made you so angry that night?" At first he hesitated, his jaw tightening as if fighting back tears. Then slowly, he began to open up. Words spilled out like water breaking through a dam, about his crumbling marriage, about losing custody of his kids, about mounting bills and sleepless nights. He admitted he had been drowning in stress for months, barely holding himself together. That night on the bus, he confessed, had been the tipping point. A misplaced wallet, a polite request. It was all too much for him to handle in his fragile state. Listening to him, she felt a mix of emotions: sadness for the pain he carried, frustration for the choices he had made, and hope that things could improve. When he finished speaking, she nodded thoughtfully. "It doesn't excuse what you did," she said quietly, "but it explains it. And now we have a chance to make things right, not just for me, but for you too." Together, they brainstormed ways he could make amends. Community service seemed like a good starting point, a way for him to give back and rebuild trust with the people he had let down. With the support of local authorities, they arranged for him to volunteer at the town's senior center, helping maintain the vans used to transport elderly residents to appointments and events. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave him a sense of purpose again. As the weeks passed, the driver threw himself into the task, pouring his energy into fixing engines and checking tire pressure. Slowly, the seniors began to warm up to him, chatting with him as he worked and thanking him for keeping their ride safe. Their gratitude reminded him of a time when he took pride in his job, before bitterness clouded his perspective. Meanwhile, the young woman visited the center often, volunteering alongside him whenever she could. Their interactions were awkward at first, filled with long pauses and cautious smiles. But over time, a friendship blossomed, one built not on forgetting the past, but on working toward a better future together. News of their unusual partnership spread throughout the town, sparking conversations about forgiveness and second chances. While some remained skeptical, many were inspired by the unlikely bond forming between two people who had every reason to stay enemies. The story became a reminder that even in moments of darkness, humanity has the power to shine through, if we're willing to let it. As the weeks turned into months, the driver began to settle into his new routine at the senior center. At first, he kept mostly to himself, focused on the mechanical work that needed doing. He'd tinker with engines, tighten bolts, and check oil levels without saying much. But the seniors weren't about to let him stay in his shell for long. They had a way of drawing people out, their warmth and curiosity breaking down walls faster than anyone expected. One afternoon, an elderly woman named Margaret approached him while he was bent over a van's engine. She leaned on her cane, watching him work with a thoughtful expression. "You're good with your hands," she remarked casually. The comment caught him off guard. No one had complimented him in so long that he didn't know how to respond at first. He muttered a quick thanks and went back to tightening a bolt, but Margaret wasn't done yet. "You know," she said, pulling up a chair nearby, "I used to have a brother who worked on cars. He loved it, said it gave him peace. Is that why you do it?" Her question hit him like a punch to the gut. Not because it was harsh, but because it was kind. For years, he'd pushed people away, convinced they wouldn't care about his struggles or understand his pain. Yet here was this tiny woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, asking him questions as if she genuinely wanted to know him. Against his better judgment, he found himself answering, "Yeah, I guess it does give me peace," he admitted after a pause. "When things get messy, fixing something feels like the only thing I can control." Margaret nodded slowly, her gaze steady. "Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? But sometimes those curveballs lead us somewhere we're meant to be." Her words stayed with him long after she left, echoing in his mind as he worked on the vans day after day. Over time, more seniors started talking to him, not just about the vehicles, but about their own lives. One man shared stories of losing his business and starting over in his 60s. A widow spoke about raising her grandchildren alone after her son passed away. Each story carried its own weight, yet there was resilience in their voices, a quiet determination to keep moving forward despite everything life had thrown at them. The young woman noticed the change in him too. When she visited the center, she saw glimpses of the man he might have been before bitterness took hold. His shoulders didn't seem as tense, and his scowl softened into something closer to a smile when someone cracked a joke. It was subtle, but undeniable. Slowly but surely, he was reclaiming pieces of himself. Their friendship deepened during these visits. They never talked much about the night on the bus. It loomed between them like an unspoken shadow, but they didn't need to. Instead, they focused on the present, finding common ground in small moments. Once, while sorting through donated books for the center's library, they discovered a shared love for mystery novels. Another time, they teamed up to organize a community garage sale, laughing as they haggled playfully over prices with shoppers. Word of their partnership spread even further, inspiring others in the town to take action. A local pastor invited the driver to speak at a support group for men struggling with anger management. Though nervous at first, he agreed, realizing he might help someone avoid making the same mistakes he had. His honesty resonated with the group members, many of whom reached out afterward to thank him for sharing his story. Meanwhile, the young woman became a regular volunteer, not just at the senior center, but also at various events around town aimed at addressing issues like financial stress and mental health. Together, she and the driver hosted workshops where they encouraged open conversations about challenges people faced. These gatherings weren't perfect. Sometimes tensions flared or old wounds reopened, but they planted seeds of understanding that grew stronger over time. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the town square, the two of them sat together on a bench outside the senior center. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves. Neither spoke for a while, content to watch the world go by. Finally, the driver broke the silence. "I never thought I'd say this," he began, his voice low but steady. "But I'm grateful for what happened that night on the bus." She turned to look at him, surprised. "Grateful? Really?" He nodded. "Not for hurting you, that part will haunt me forever. But if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have ended up here. I wouldn't have met these people, learned from them, or realized how much I still have to offer. And I definitely wouldn't have earned your forgiveness." Her lips curved into a soft smile. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to move forward, to find hope even when things feel broken." They sat there for a little longer, letting the weight of his words sink in. In that moment, surrounded by the hum of evening traffic and distant laughter, they both felt a sense of peace. Life hadn't erased their scars, but it had given them tools to heal, and perhaps more importantly, it had shown them the power of connection. What started as a shocking incident on a bus had transformed into something far greater, a testament to the strength of human spirit, the importance of second chances, and the belief that no one is beyond redemption. As the stars began to twinkle above, the town felt different somehow, kinder, more united. And though the journey wasn't over, they knew they were heading in the right direction, one step at a time. As the seasons changed, so did the rhythm of life in the town. The once shocking story of the bus driver and the young woman became less of a headline and more of a quiet reminder of how people can grow when given the chance. But the transformation didn't stop with just them. It rippled outward, touching lives in ways no one had anticipated. At the senior center, the driver's reputation grew beyond his mechanical skills. He started joining the seniors for coffee breaks, listening to their stories and sharing bits of his own. One day, an elderly man named George pulled him aside after breakfast. George had been quiet during most group activities, but there was a spark in his eyes that told the driver he had something important to say. "You remind me of my son," George began, his voice soft but steady. "He used to fix cars too before things went sideways." The driver waited patiently as George hesitated, searching for the right words. "I lost touch with him years ago. We argued, and I said things I shouldn't have. Now, I don't even know where he is." The honesty caught the driver off guard. For years, he'd kept his own pain locked away, convinced it was better not to burden others. Yet here was George, baring his soul without hesitation. Something about the vulnerability moved him deeply. "I'm sorry you went through that," the driver replied sincerely. "But maybe it's not too late to reach out. You never know what might happen." George nodded thoughtfully, though doubt lingered in his expression. Still, the conversation planted a seed of hope within him, a possibility he hadn't considered until now. From that day on, the two men developed a bond, meeting regularly to talk about everything from old car models to family regrets. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes emotions ran high, and tears flowed freely. But both men found solace in knowing they weren't alone in carrying their burdens. Meanwhile, the young woman continued to play a key role in bridging divides across the community. Her workshops gained popularity, drawing participants from all walks of life. One session focused on managing stress, featuring practical tips like breathing exercises and journaling. Another tackled financial struggles, offering resources for budgeting and debt relief. What set her apart, however, wasn't just the content, it was her approach. She spoke not as someone who had all the answers, but as someone who understood what it meant to feel overwhelmed and unsure. During one workshop, a middle-aged woman raised her hand hesitantly. Her name was Linda, and she worked at the local grocery store. "I've been struggling lately," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. My husband left and I'm trying to raise our kids on my own. Some days I don't know how to keep going. The room fell silent, everyone leaning in to listen. The young woman smiled gently, her tone reassuring. First, let me say this. You're stronger than you think. It's okay to feel lost sometimes. What matters is taking small steps forward, even when it feels impossible. Linda nodded, blinking back tears. After the session ended, several attendees approached her, offering support and sharing their own experiences. It was moments like these that reminded the young woman why she kept showing up, because connection could be a lifeline when people felt like they were drowning. The driver, too, began stepping outside his comfort zone. Encouraged by the pastor who had invited him to speak at the support group, he started attending meetings himself. At first, he sat quietly in the back, listening as others shared their struggles. Gradually, he opened up, admitting that anger had ruled his life for far too long. Hearing similar stories from other men helped him realize he wasn't alone, and that healing was possible if he committed to change. One evening, after a particularly powerful meeting, a younger man approached him. I just wanted to thank you, he said earnestly. Hearing your story made me realize I need to take responsibility for my actions. I've hurt people I care about, and I want to do better. The driver felt a lump rise in his throat. For so long he'd believed he was irredeemable, destined to carry the weight of his mistakes forever. Now hearing those words from someone else gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, his journey could inspire others to seek forgiveness, not just from others, but from themselves. Back at the senior center, the bond between the driver and the young woman continued to strengthen. They often spent evenings brainstorming new ideas to bring the community together. One idea they came up with was a storytelling night, where residents could share personal tales of resilience and redemption. The event drew a large crowd, filling the center with laughter, tears, and applause. It became clear that everyone carried scars, but also strength. As the months passed, the town itself seemed to shift. Neighbors greeted each other more warmly, checking in on those who might be struggling. Conversations about mental health and emotional well-being became less taboo, creating space for openness and understanding. Even the bus route, once associated with tension and fear, became a symbol of renewal. A new driver took over the route, but passengers noticed subtle changes, a friendlier demeanor, a willingness to chat. Through it all, the driver and the young woman remained pillars of the community, embodying the idea that forgiveness and second chances could transform lives. Their story served as a beacon of hope, proving that even in moments of darkness, light could emerge if people chose to see it, and yet neither of them saw themselves as heroes. To them, they were simply two individuals doing their best to navigate life's challenges, one step at a time. As the town embraced its newfound sense of unity, life began to feel lighter somehow. The air seemed fresher, and conversations carried a warmth that hadn't been there before. People who had once kept to themselves now made it a point to check in on their neighbors. It was as if the entire community had woken up from a long sleep, realizing how much stronger they were when they stood together. For the driver, this shift wasn't just something he observed. It became a part of his everyday reality. Every morning he woke up with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. His days at the senior center weren't just about fixing vans anymore. They were about connecting with people, learning from them, and finding meaning in the little things. He even started mentoring a teenage boy named Alex who lived nearby and loved tinkering with engines. Alex was shy at first, unsure of how to approach the gruff man everyone used to fear. But one day, after seeing him work on a van outside the center, the boy mustered the courage to ask, "Can I help?" The driver hesitated for a moment, surprised by the request. Then, with a small nod, he handed Alex a wrench. "Here," he said gruffly. "Hold this steady while I tighten the bolt." That simple act marked the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Over time, Alex became a regular fixture at the center, eagerly soaking up every bit of knowledge the driver shared. More importantly, though, The driver found himself opening up to the boy in ways he never thought possible. They talked about cars, sure, but also about school, dreams, and the challenges of growing up. For the first time in years, the driver felt like he was making a difference, not just in his own life but in someone else's too. The young woman noticed the change in both of them. One afternoon, she stopped by the garage area to find Alex laughing as the driver demonstrated how to replace a spark plug. Their easy camaraderie brought a smile to her face. Later, when she mentioned it to him, the driver shrugged, trying to play it off like it wasn't a big deal. But she could see the pride in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement that he was building something good. Her own role in the community continued to evolve as well. Inspired by the success of the storytelling night, she organized more events aimed at fostering connection. There was a monthly potluck where residents brought dishes from their childhoods, sharing recipes alongside memories. Another event featured a kindness wall, where people wrote notes of gratitude or encouragement for others to read. These initiatives might have seemed small, but their impact was profound. One evening, during a particularly lively potluck, a woman approached her with tears in her eyes. "I didn't think anyone would care," she confessed, clutching a plate of homemade dumplings. "My husband passed away last year and I've been so lonely. But tonight feels like family." The young woman hugged her tightly, feeling a lump rise in her own throat. Moments like these reminded her why she kept pushing forward even when doubts crept in. She knew she couldn't fix everything. Life was messy and pain didn't disappear overnight. But she believed deeply in the power of small acts of kindness to create ripples of change. Even the bus route, once tainted by the memory of conflict, began to feel different. Passengers greeted each other warmly, striking up conversations that turned strangers into acquaintances. The new driver, a cheerful woman in her 40s, went out of her way to make everyone feel welcome. On rainy days, she'd offer umbrellas to those caught without one. During holidays, she decorated the bus with twinkling lights and garlands, spreading cheer to commuters. But perhaps the most surprising development came when the original driver decided to visit the bus stop where everything had unraveled months earlier. Standing there watching the familiar route pass by, he felt a mix of emotions: regret for what he'd done, gratitude for the second chance he'd been given, and hope for what lay ahead. A few passengers recognized him and waved, their smiles genuine. It was a humbling reminder that forgiveness wasn't just about moving past anger. It was about rebuilding trust, brick by brick. Back at the senior center, the community rallied around another project, creating a memory garden. The idea came from Margaret, the same elderly woman who had first broken through the driver's defenses. "We all carry stories inside us," she explained during a planning meeting. "Why not honor them with a place where we can reflect and remember?" Everyone pitched in, planting flowers, setting up benches, and painting stones with meaningful words like hope, courage, and togetherness. When the garden was finally completed, it became a sanctuary for residents, young and old alike. Parents brought their children to play among the blooms while seniors sat quietly, reminiscing about days gone by. On the day of the garden's dedication ceremony, the driver stood beside the young woman, looking out at the crowd, gathered to celebrate. As speeches were made and applause filled the air, he leaned over to whisper, "Do you think we did enough?" She smiled softly, shaking her head. "It's not about doing enough. It's about starting something that keeps going, even when we're not here to see it." Her words stayed with him long after the ceremony ended. That night, as he walked home under a sky dotted with stars, he realized she was right. Life wasn't about perfection or tying up loose ends. It was about planting seeds and trusting they'd grow in ways you couldn't predict. And so, the town continued to heal. One conversation, one gesture, one moment at a time. What had begun as a single incident on a bus had blossomed into something far greater, a testament to resilience, compassion, and the unshakable belief that no one is beyond redemption, if only we're willing to reach out and try. As the seasons rolled on, the town's newfound spirit of togetherness began to take root in ways no one had expected. People who had once been strangers now greeted each other by name. Conversations at the grocery store weren't just about weather, or prices. They were about life, struggles, and dreams. The memory garden became a favorite spot for reflection, laughter, and even tears. It was as if the entire community had learned how to breathe again, letting go of old grudges and fears. The driver found himself spending more time in the garden than he ever imagined he would. At first, it felt strange to sit among the flowers and benches, surrounded by symbols of growth and renewal. But over time, he began to see its beauty, not just in the vibrant colors of the blooms, but in the stories they represented. Each painted stone carried a piece of someone's heart, reminding him that everyone had their own battles to fight. One afternoon, as he sat on a bench watching leaves drift lazily from the trees, Margaret joined him. She held a cup of tea and her hands, steam curling into the crisp autumn air. "You look like you're thinking hard about something," she said with a knowing smile. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I guess I am. I keep wondering, do people really forgive me? Or are they just pretending because they feel sorry for me?" Margaret took a sip of her tea before responding. Her voice was calm, but firm. Forgiveness isn't about pretending. It's about choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck in anger. These people, they've seen your effort. They know you're trying to make things right. Her words lingered in his mind long after she left. That evening, as he walked home, he thought about all the small moments that had added up over the months. The seniors' smiles when he fixed their vans, Alex's excitement while learning new skills, the nods of recognition from passengers on the bus route. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something you could measure. It was something you felt in the little connections that grew stronger every day. Meanwhile, the young woman continued to inspire those around her with her quiet determination. Her workshops evolved into regular gatherings where people shared not just advice, but also meals and laughter. One chilly Saturday morning, she organized a pancake breakfast fundraiser to support families struggling during the holidays. The event brought out nearly everyone in town, from kids running around with syrup-sticky fingers to grandparents sharing tales of Christmases past. Amidst the chaos of flipping pancakes and pouring coffee, a man approached her. He looked familiar, though she couldn't quite place him. "I wanted to say thank you," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. "Your workshop helped me finally talk to my daughter. We hadn't spoken in years, but we're working on it now." She felt a lump rise in her throat as she nodded. "That's amazing. Thank you for telling me." Moments like these reminded her why she kept showing up. For herself, yes, but also for others. Healing wasn't linear. It came in fits and starts, often messy and unpredictable. Yet every step forward mattered, no matter how small. Back at the senior center, the driver decided to take another leap of faith. He proposed organizing a car show, a celebration of classic vehicles and the memories they carried. The idea sparked excitement among the seniors, many of whom had fond recollections of road trips and family drives. Together, the community worked tirelessly to bring the event to life, polishing old cars, baking pies, and setting up booths filled with handmade crafts. On the day of the car show, the parking lot buzzed with energy. Children marveled at gleaming chrome bumpers, while adults swapped stories about engines and road adventures. Even the young woman joined in, snapping photos and cheering alongside the crowd. As the driver stood beside a restored vintage truck, answering questions and sharing anecdotes, he realized something profound. This wasn't just about cars. It was about honoring the past while embracing the future, a reminder that life, like an engine, needed care and attention to keep running smoothly. But perhaps the most unexpected moment came later that evening. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the festivities, George, the elderly man who had confided in the driver about losing touch with his son, pulled him aside. There was a nervous excitement in George's eyes as he handed him a folded letter. "I did what you suggested," George said quietly. "I wrote to my son, and..." he wrote back. The driver stared at the letter, stunned. "That's incredible," he managed to say. "What did he say?" George smiled. tears glistening in his eyes. He said he wants to meet. For the first time in years, I feel like maybe we can fix things. In that moment, the driver understood the true power of connection. By opening up himself, he had given others permission to do the same. Forgiveness wasn't just about repairing broken relationships. It was about creating space for new ones to grow. As the night drew to a close, the driver and the young woman stood side by side, watching the last of the visitors pack up and leave. The cool breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and freshly cut grass. Neither spoke for a while, content to simply be present in the quiet aftermath of such a joyful day. Finally, she turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we'll ever stop being surprised by how much good can come from bad situations?" He grinned, shaking his head. "I hope not. If we ever stop being surprised, maybe we'll forget how lucky we are." And so, the town moved forward. Together. What had started as a single act of violence had transformed into a journey of healing, resilience, and hope. Every person played a part, whether big or small, in stitching the fabric of their community back together. Life still had its challenges, of course, but they faced them differently now, with open hearts, steady hands, and a belief that even in the darkest times, light could find its way through. As winter settled over the town, wrapping everything in a soft blanket of frost, the sense of unity that had been growing throughout the year seemed to deepen. The cold weather brought people indoors, but it didn't stop them from staying connected. If anything, it made them more intentional about reaching out, checking on neighbors, sharing warm meals, and finding ways to brighten each other's days. The driver found himself busier than ever during this season. With icy roads and freezing temperatures making travel difficult for many seniors, he took it upon himself to ensure their vans were in top condition. He spent hours tinkering with heaters, defrosting windows, and double-checking tires to make sure no one got stranded in the snow. It was hard work, but he didn't mind. For the first time in years, he felt like he was truly needed, not just as a mechanic, but as someone who cared. One snowy morning, as he worked on a stubborn engine refusing to start, an elderly woman named Edith arrived at the garage bundled in layers of wool. She carried a thermos and 2 mugs, her cheeks rosy from the cold. "I thought you might need something warm," she said with a smile, setting the thermos down beside him. "It's hot chocolate with extra marshmallows." Her kindness caught him off guard, and for a moment he wasn't sure what to say. "Thank you," he finally replied, his voice gruff but sincere. As they sat together sipping the steaming drink, Edith began telling stories about winters past, how she used to build snow forts with her grandchildren and bake cookies shaped like stars. Her words painted pictures so vivid, he could almost see the laughter-filled scenes in his mind. "You should come over sometime," she suggested casually. "We're having a little gathering next week. Just some friends, nothing fancy." He hesitated, unsure if he belonged in such company. But when she insisted, promising there would be plenty of pie, he agreed. That small invitation marked another step forward, a chance to step out of his comfort zone and into the warmth of community. Meanwhile, the young woman continued to weave herself into the fabric of the town in subtle, yet meaningful ways. During one particularly harsh storm, she organized a snow buddy system, pairing volunteers with those who needed help shoveling driveways or running errands. The initiative not only eased the burden on older residents, but also strengthened bonds between neighbors. One man whose driveway had been cleared by a teenager he barely knew later invited the boy's family over for dinner. Simple acts like these reminded everyone how interconnected they truly were. At the senior center, preparations were underway for the annual holiday celebration, a tradition that had grown bigger and brighter thanks to the efforts of the driver and the young woman. Together, they transformed the space into a cozy haven filled with twinkling lights, garlands, and handmade decorations. Residents pitched in however they could, whether by baking cookies, crafting ornaments, or simply sharing stories around the fireplace. On the night of the celebration, the room buzzed with laughter and music. Children darted between tables, clutching candy canes, while adults exchanged hugs and heartfelt wishes. Even Alex, the teenage boy the driver had mentored, showed up wearing a Santa hat, proudly showing off a model car he'd built entirely on his own. When the driver saw it, his chest swelled with pride. But the highlight of the evening came when George stood up to speak. Holding a glass of cider, he addressed the crowd, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "A few months ago, I told someone here that I'd lost touch with my son. Thanks to their encouragement, I reached out, and he's coming to visit next week." The room erupted in applause, tears glistening in more than a few eyes. George looked directly at the driver as he added, "Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to change everything." Later, as the party wound down and guests began heading home, the young woman pulled the driver aside. "Do you realize what you've done?" she asked, her tone light but serious. "You've given so many people hope, including yourself." He shrugged modestly, though a hint of a smile played on his lips. "I didn't do it alone. None of us did. It's been all of us, working together." She nodded, squeezing his arm gently. "Exactly. That's what makes it so special." As December gave way to January, the town braced for the new year with a renewed sense of purpose. Resolutions weren't just personal goals this time, they were collective aspirations. At a community meeting held in the Memory Garden, residents shared ideas for projects they wanted to tackle together, building a playground, starting a book club, even hosting a spring festival. Each suggestion sparked excitement, proof that the spirit of collaboration had taken hold. For the driver, the new year brought another milestone. After months of rebuilding trust, he received permission to visit his children again. His ex-wife had seen the changes in him, the patience, the humility, the effort, and agreed it was time to let him back into their lives. The first meeting was emotional, filled with awkward silences and tentative smiles. But as they sat around the kitchen table sharing slices of cake, something shifted. The walls that had once divided them began to crumble, brick by brick. The young woman celebrated the moment with him, listening intently as he recounted every detail. "How does it feel?" she asked softly. "Like I'm finally waking up," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready to face it." And so life in the town continued to unfold, one day, one connection, one act of kindness at a time. What had started as a single incident on a bus had blossomed into something far greater, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of forgiveness. Through every challenge and triumph, the people of the town proved that even in the coldest seasons, warmth could always be found, if only you were willing to share it. As spring arrived, painting the town with fresh blooms and longer days, the sense of renewal felt almost tangible. The Memory Garden, once bare branches and frost-covered stones, burst into life with daffodils, tulips, and cherry blossoms. Became a symbol of how far the community had come, a place where people gathered to reflect, celebrate, and dream about what lay ahead. The driver found himself spending more time in the garden than ever before. Each morning he'd take a cup of coffee and sit on one of the benches watching the sun rise over the hills. Sometimes Alex would join him, eager to share updates about school or ask for advice about fixing an old bike he'd found. Other times, it was Margaret or Edith, bringing stories from their own lives that made him laugh or think deeply. These moments reminded him that healing wasn't something you achieved alone. It happened through connection bit by bit. One sunny afternoon, as he tended to a flower bed near the entrance, a young mother approached him with her toddler in tow. "Thank you for helping my dad last winter," she said, her voice warm with gratitude. "He talks about you all the time." The driver paused, surprised. "Your dad?" She nodded. "Yeah, Mr. Thompson, the guy who always sits by the window at the senior center. You fixed his van when it broke down during that big storm. He says you saved him from freezing out there." He chuckled softly, brushing dirt off his hands. "I just did my job." "No," she insisted, shaking her head. "You gave him hope. That's more than just a job." Her words stayed with him, long after she left, echoing in his mind as he watered the flowers. Hope. It was such a simple word, yet it carried so much weight. For years he'd believed he had none left. Now he realized that hope wasn't something you found. It was something you created, not just for yourself, but for others too. Meanwhile, the young woman continued to inspire those around her with her quiet determination. Her workshops had evolved into regular meetings where people shared not only challenges, but also victories, no matter how small. One evening, during a session focused on goal setting, a teenager shyly raised her hand. "I got accepted into art school," she announced, her voice trembling with excitement. "I didn't think I could do it, but I did." The room erupted in applause, and the young woman beamed with pride. "See?" she said, addressing the group. "Every step forward matters. Even if it feels tiny, it's still moving you closer to where you want to be." These gatherings weren't just about solving problems. They were about celebrating resilience and reminding everyone that they weren't alone. Whether it was a single parent sharing tips for managing stress or a retiree offering wisdom gained from decades of experience, every story added another thread to the tapestry of their shared journey. Back at the senior center, preparations were underway for the annual Spring Festival, an event that had grown exponentially since its humble beginnings. This year, the entire town pitched in, transforming the center's grounds into a vibrant fairground filled with stalls, games, and live music. Children ran wild with face paint and balloons, while adults danced under strings of colorful lights. The air buzzed with laughter, chatter, and the smell of freshly grilled food. During a quiet lull in the festivities, the driver stood beside the young woman, watching families gather around picnic tables. "Do you remember when we first started all this?" he asked, gesturing toward the lively scene. She smiled, nodding. "Hard to believe it's come this far, isn't it?" "It's more than I ever imagined," he admitted. "And honestly, I don't think any of it would have happened without you." She shook her head, dismissing the compliment. "We did this together. All of us. None of it was possible alone." Her humility struck him, as it always did. In so many ways, she reminded him of the power of leading with kindness instead of ego. Together, they had shown the town that forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was strength. And second chances. They weren't gifts given lightly. They were opportunities earned through effort and trust. As summer approached, the town prepared for another milestone, the grand opening of the new playground. Built entirely through volunteer efforts, it stood as a testament to what could be achieved when people worked side by side. On the day of the unveiling, children squealed with delight as they climbed slides, swung on swings, and chased each other across the grass. Parents watched with smiles, grateful for a space where their kids could play safely. Standing at the edge of the playground, the driver felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He thought back to the night on the bus, the anger, the fear, the shame, and marveled at how far he'd come. Life hadn't erased his scars, but it had taught him how to carry them differently. Instead of letting pain define him, he used it as fuel to help others heal. That evening, as fireworks lit up the sky to celebrate the playground's opening, the young woman joined him on a nearby bench. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, leaning back to watch the bursts of color. "Just everything," he replied, his voice soft. "How one moment can change everything. How forgiveness can turn anger into understanding. How a whole town can grow stronger because a few people decided to try." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the glow of the fireworks. "It's funny, isn't it? We never know which moments will shape us or how far they'll take us." "No," he agreed, shaking his head. "But maybe that's the beauty of it. You keep showing up, keep trying, and eventually, you find your way." And so, the story of the bus driver and the young woman became more than just a tale of redemption. It became a blueprint for living, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light can emerge if you're willing to let it. That forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's choosing to move forward. And that second chances aren't endings, they're beginnings, waiting to unfold. As the fireworks faded and the crowd began to disperse, the town settled into a peaceful rhythm once again. But beneath the surface, something had shifted forever. The scars remained, yes, but so did the hope. And in that delicate balance, they found strength enough to face whatever came next together.